Chapter 6. Another Michonne woman with wrinkled features approached from my right. She set a pitcher and 3 cups on the table. She wiped her hands on the apron and shifted the braid from her shoulder to her back.
I thought you might like refreshments.
She set the things down, threw me a quick glance, then turned to go.
Thank you, Decenny called out. Would you like some juice?
Despite the healing magic Liatra used to cure my illness, my shoulders hung heavy. The sweetness might lift my energy. My stomach grumbled. Decenny's eyes trailed down to my midsection, and she gave another half-smile.
We will see to your rumbling tummy in a bit. Meanwhile, let me tell you the state of things.
Thank you, Decenny.
Now, where to start?
Her fingers tapped the table.
When the governor was unseated, a Templar was temporarily placed on the throne. The people of Milbury and Guinness will soon hold an election to choose their own leader.
The farmers would choose? Decenny's chin bobbed up and down with enthusiasm.
Although we continued to send food to the east so the monarch wouldn't miss it, we decided it wasn't sustainable to continue. Farmers unwilling to trade their children into the darkest kind of servitude starved, and the king never showed interest in the foul tidings of this side of the continent. So my master decided he would send a letter to the king. It seems the monarch wasn't pleased, or his advisors weren't. He is but a boy, because he sent a scroll asking the master to answer for his crimes.
What crime? A letter?
No, the removal of his regent, the governor.
Did you have something to do with his unseating?
Decenny laughed. We kept him in a cell down a tunnel until we returned him to Milbury for trial.
She gestured toward a tunnel opposite the one through which we'd entered the great room.
Believe me, each day spent listening to his blathering was long.
Of all the luck, I found myself in a place filled with magic users who'd unseated the king's own region and were now considered criminals. Could my tidings decline further? Perhaps I'd have been better off if I died in the snow than been eaten by wolves. But my mind strayed to the short-haired woman who'd healed what ailed me and decided to voice the question that rose to the top of my mind. Is Liatra a registered magic user? Is that the right word, registered?
That's the right word, but magic users are no longer being registered in Warrington. In fact, when a dark presence there was removed, also by us, many of the magicians who taught and studied there formed a caravan and rode off to the southernmost coast, near a place called the Dark Wood. We have neither seen nor heard from them since. Those who remained were interviewed to see where their loyalties lie. Those who supported the king were allowed to leave, but there were only 2.
I was baffled. 2? Only 2 who supported the crown? Decenny nodded as if this were obvious.
Imagine you were a magician, and you'd seen people suffer for years when their only crime was possessing a mana pool like yours.
She cocked one eyebrow for emphasis.
The remainder showed empathy, and that's valuable when you're reforming a university to teach young people.
Reforming it how?
For starters, they've renamed it Warrington Academy. It is now a place for young people to learn how to hone their talents and advance their skills. Our first batch of students start in just 2 days' time.
You are teaching children how to fight with magic? Excitement blended with fear, then a chill shot up my spine.
Or heal with it. There is much more to magic than combat.
Footsteps echoed in the tunnel. Then a Michonne with the delicate features of youth appeared. Decenny rose and gestured toward her.
This is Shabana. She is a cousin of mine and will be leaving tomorrow for classes at the academy.
Hi, Shabana said with an enthusiastic wave of a hand.
This is Tess, Decenny said. She is from Guinness Peaks and has unfortunately lost her home.
Oh. Shabana lowered her head and her ears lowered. I'm sorry to hear this. Will you make your home here? Decenny chortled.
Now, Shabana, don't get ahead of yourself. Tess is but 20 minutes this side of her sickness. Let the girl recover.
Would it be a violation for me to show her around? Shabana turned her gaze on me, and those ears had perked up again. Decenny sat quiet for a few heartbeats, and right when I got the impression she'd been put in an uncomfortable situation, she answered,
I think a brief tour would be acceptable, if Tess would like.
I'd be honored to see your burrow. Anything to staunch the memory of my father being swept overhead then slammed to the snowy earth. Shabana gave her hands a single clap. Great! She turned her eyes toward Decenny and raised pleading eyebrows.
How kind of you, cousin.
Decenny grabbed my hand and gave it a final squeeze.
We'll talk later, if you wish.
I nodded. She returned her focus to her cousin.
Shabana, keep the tour brief so you can stop at the commissary. She hasn't eaten since yesterday.
I hadn't eaten since the previous day, but I didn't correct her.
We'll eat first then.
Her face lit into a grin.
I'm starving.
Even though I lacked social experience, the expression reminded me how my father looked at me when I was young and learned something new. The first time I made a fire with my own 2 hands, when I'd sewn a split seam in his clothes without being asked. Every thought seemed to revert to Baba, otherwise I might have smiled at the Michonne's expression. Light shimmered off the black surface of the rocky cave in a bend ahead. After a week of snow, I longed to feel the warmth of daylight on my face. I didn't know what I envisioned as we reached the final turn, but my expectations proved insufficient when we stepped onto a massive plateau with thick, lush grass, simple structures surrounding its perimeter, and natural stone steps cut into the edges leading down to the sprawling burrow in all directions. Shabana stopped, threw out both arms, then swept her arms wide.
Our foundation.
I slammed my mouth shut when I realized it gaped in surprise. Green blanketed the valley all the way to high, steep cliffs that surrounded it. Narrow northern and western passes led out, but unless one could climb towering stone walls, there were no other exits. Sturdy structures of all shapes and sizes stood in the valley below. Although I shivered in the winter chill, the sight of wide farms with long rows brought the warmth of familiarity. Since nothing rose from the soil at the time, I couldn't be sure what they grew there, but I guessed they stretched wider than the lands my father and I toiled over. The word I uttered was the only one that would do. Beautiful. The Michonne's head bobbed.
Yes, I will miss it, but I plan to return at every opportunity.
Because you're going to the academy. In Warrington, right? Another enthusiastic nod.
Yes, I'm going to learn healing magic. The masters say my light affinity qualifies me.
Affinity?
Oh, yes. In your attributes pane, scroll to the bottom.
She winked her eyes in succession to analyze me. My breath hitched in my chest because my father's warnings about analyzing people without permission stood in contradiction to the easy way this Michonne woman inspected me. But she seemed only to glance, then she nodded.
I see you have a mana pool as well, but I cannot see your affinities. The goddess doesn't show us these things.
The speedy ramble of her words outpaced my brain, so accustomed was I to my father's intentional and precise diction. When I caught up, I decided I hadn't communicated my question very well because she hadn't answered it. But what does it mean, affinity?
Oh, are you still bound to your parents?
My heartbeat slowed as the violent end of my baba returned to my mind. Shabana must have read something in my features because she pressed one hand to her heart and reached out with the other as if she grasped my shoulder, though she didn't quite complete the motion. Those feline ears dipped again.
I didn't mean to be nosy.
Even when she apologized, her words came in a stream of closely connected syllables.
It's just that you can learn about your affinity and anything else in your interface by focusing on the word or phrases you want to understand better.
It wasn't like my mind window was new to me, and I'd been focusing on items to learn their meanings all my life. But all I could muster was spent trying to maintain pace with the words spewing from her thin lips. I squinted and set my gaze on her mouth as she continued.
So, if you go to your Attributes tab, you can scroll down to Magic Affinities, then focus on a label to receive an explanation.
It was the same tab I'd noticed when Baba died and the expanded mind window was unlocked. I just hadn't scrolled down. I nodded.
Oh, good. You should learn all about these things.
My gaze stopped on my breathing portrait in the interface. Even though I hadn't bathed in a couple days, my short black hair shone in the light of Solara's star, and the purple robe adorning my figure gave off brilliant reflections. My focus went to the robe, and the little tab at the top of the screen changed. Text filled the screen beneath the tab. Luminous robe of the Acolyte, level 3, type, robe, slot, body, quality, rare, durability, 72 of 75, +1 intelligence. When I turned my gaze to Shabana, the text faded so I saw her clearly. She stared into the distance, waiting patiently, but also tapping one foot. Returning to the Attributes tab, I scrolled down. Contessa of Milbury, level 3, human. No class selected. Strength, 13. Dexterity, 3. Intelligence, 7, parentheses 1. Wisdom, 2. Constitution, 15. Charisma, 6. Weapon skills, staff, 4. General skills, Survival 4. Magic schools. Light magic 0. Shadow magic 0. Nature magic 0. Status effects none. Affinities, learned languages, common. Magic affinities, potential 100%. Light 23%. Shadow 91%. I noted how my intelligence had notched up a point from before, but the messages earlier warned I couldn't spend points anywhere until I found an attributes trainer. Then I recalled the last line describing the robe Liatra had given me, +1 intelligence. That made sense, but another thing brought an itch to my mind. Why do we see only power ratings when we analyze others? Shabana tilted her head to one side, adopted a distant gaze, then she blinked.
Oh, I understand. It wasn't so long ago I asked the master the same question. There's no easy answer. Melee power, melee defense, magic power, magic defense, ranged power, and ranged defense are probably cumulative ratings based on the overall statistics you can't see. Do you understand?
I shook my head.
Okay, let me explain it this way. I can see your health, your mana, and your power ratings, sad as they are.
I frowned, then she slapped my shoulder.
I'm joking. We all start somewhere, and I don't have a lot of room to brag.
Her gaze darted skyward.
Where was I? Oh, right. So your melee rating is 5. Your melee attributes, like strength and dexterity, are combined somehow to make up that rating. If they are cumulative, the calculations are beyond me. I hope to learn more at the academy.
I twisted my lips to one side. If I considered her explanation from the perspective of her blade dancer cousin, the reasons for the attributes became clearer. Although I didn't want to appear naive or downright stupid, curiosity's fire sparked to life in my belly, so I decided to voice my theory. So if I understand, the goddess provides us these power ratings as simpler ways to analyze an enemy so we can decide if it's wise to engage with them. Am I right? Shabana dropped her fist to her hip.
I only hope I can remember how you said that later. Why, now it makes more sense to me than it did before.
She unfurled one fist and shook a finger in the air.
You know, I think I like you. We could be friends. You're smart.
My worries about appearing ignorant seemed unfounded, and I couldn't suppress my smile. Thanks.
You're welcome. Now let's hit the commissary. I'm starved.
We strolled across the grass field of the plateau, and Shabana pointed at the buildings surrounding us in turns. She started on the right.
The one with the smoke rising is the smithy. All our armor, weapons, and tools get made there.
Oh, wonderful. She nodded.
Just past that is the alchemist shop. I don't know why they set them up here when there's so much space below, but I suspect they wanted to allow for growth, more people, which means more food, which means more farms. Right now we have an abundance of food for our 57 people. There's also a barracks with an archery range down the steps over there.
She pointed a finger to the northwest.
And we just upgraded the row houses where we sleep to apartments. Strange name, but it is what it is. Those are the stacked buildings down there.
She pointed to the southwest.
There's also a fishery by that river.
We passed a low building on our left she called the master's cabin. Just beyond that was the architect's cabin, and finally the sprawling building with a wide trellis reaching to the edge of the steps was the commissary. They took their meals there. Rows of wooden tables with benches and a few circular ones with chairs covered the floor inside the commissary, but the first thing I noticed was all the tails and cat ears. The Michonne filled the place, and their constant chatter filled the air. The aroma of meat made my stomach grumble. A delicious smell of cooking greens and spices also swept to my nostrils.
Smells wonderful.
Shabana nodded.
You'll love the food. I'm a food girl. I live for food. Food is... Well, I'm boring you. It's on that shelf under the bamboo coverings. Would you like to meet some people while we eat?
I scanned the midday crowd, seated around the tables, and a surge of trepidation washed over me. Shabana read me like a mind window document.
Shy, are you? That's okay. We can sit at one of the round tables in the corner there.
Relief washed over me as I raised one of the bamboo covers to reveal a ham steak with little patches of brown where they were fried. A piece of yellow fruit I didn't recognize was cut in a circle and browned like the flesh of the ham it lay atop. What's that?
Pineapple. We have a grove with different fruits on the north side of the burrow. They grow just beyond the trees.
We snatched up our plates, then Shabana handed me a 2-tined fork and a knife from cylindrical wooden utensil dispensers. As we strode toward a table, I added to the chit-chat filling the commissary. Are you excited about going to the academy? She nodded while chewing a piece of ham, then swallowed.
Very. If I can excel in the magic arts, I might be able to join combat parties later and battle the demons and monsters that plague Rubal.
Sounds dangerous. She raised one shoulder.
The master sees to our safety.
Shabana gripped the table and leaned forward.
You know, with your mana pool, you'd be eligible to practice magic at the academy.
Although I noticed the quick change of topic, I didn't want to seem pushy. Really? Why would I do that?
Wouldn't you want to be able to defend yourself in such a dangerous world? They'll teach you there.
Magic, combat, it all sounded better suited for stronger people. I'm just a farmer. Maybe I could work on the farms. Shabana waved a dismissive hand.
It's like Decenny tells me. The world is what you make it, and you are what you do within it. They could always use a farmer, but they have plenty. If you want to make inroads, they need combatants.
My earlier thought leapt from my lips before I could consider my words. Because of the king? Because of what you all did to his regent? Although I expected a tight-lipped response, Shabana showed me the opposite. Her teeth shone white when she spread her lips wide.
Because of that, yes. Potentially. But also because demons now run amok across the lands. The governor's former soldiers have begun to raid small towns and farms. If the king brings troops all the way to this side of the continent, they will have to contend with those problems as much as we will, though. The master doubts that will happen.
And you think I could fight alongside your people after I learn at the academy? A vision of me standing in my purple robe, casting magic against the dark demon who'd murdered my father, caused my heart to rush its pace.
Absolutely. You have a mana pool. Magicians aren't as common as you'd think. It's a blessing from the goddess herself, and if you'll forgive me for saying it, farming is a waste for one such as you. Does that offend?
Offend? No. But farming is my life. It's what I've always done.
And you can probably continue to do it. I'm sure Decenny would welcome you.
She lopped off another chunk of ham, then stuffed it in her mouth. I admit the prospect of chasing down those who murdered my father intrigues me. Shabana's fork clanked to the plate. Her facial muscles went slack. One hand grabbed a lock of hair and yanked.
Murdered? Oh no, when?
2 days ago, just before I was brought here.
That's terrible. Did you see them? Who were they?
They could have only been the demons you mentioned, orange skin, and one large black-skinned one. Like his skin had been burnt stone. He had glowing eyes. Her face morphed into a tighter expression. Her lips turned white. The muscles under one eye twitched, and the nodes in her jaw jumped.
Demons. You'd think they'd learn. But they must be fought back again and again.
She dropped both shoulders.
You should come. I would help you fight these murderers one day.
Shabana stabbed the last chunk of ham on her plate with aggression. How does one get into this academy? She covered her mouth with one hand as she chewed. After she swallowed, she said,
We have connections. They're just starting their first class since the change in structure. Our priestess moved there to bring Solar's light into Warrington. The chapel is part of the university where she carries the title of master. Masters are teachers. She's sponsoring me, and I'm sure she could get you in.
The idea was ridiculous. My farm was gone, Baba was gone. I had no one, and while the idea of retribution against the murdering minions of the underworld held a hefty measure of attraction, I was barely a woman. Baba's voice sent a reminder from eternity.
You must find a man named Drasenwelling. He will train you. Do everything you can to advance your skills.
Did you check your magic affinity? The academy will offer light and shadow curriculums, and the faculty will ask.
Although her persistence nagged at me, I nodded, then checked again. Magic affinities, potential 100%, light 23%, shadow 91%. Since I'd been distracted earlier, my review of the numbers took me by surprise. Were they as high as they seemed? If I told them about the shadow affinity, would the instructors force me away from Shabana to teach me only that curriculum? The days seemed to bring more questions than answers, and I longed for companionship, so I decided to keep it simple. In other words, I lied. Well, Omitted. My light affinity is 23%.
Oh, that's not bad at all. If you have any potential. What's that score?
I struggled over whether to tell her. What if they sent me away to this academy despite my desires? But something in the relaxed expression on her soft features lured the truth. 100%?
You read it wrong.
I shook my head. But I didn't. Her jaw dropped.
Do you trifle with me?
My head twisted faster. I would never. She shoved the chair with the back of her leg so hard when she rose it teetered, but it managed to stay on upright. Those curious ears strained so hard forward, I imagined they might pop right off. Farmer indeed. She whipped the fingers of one hand toward her chest.
Come, we have to tell Decenny.
I stuffed the last mouthful of food into my mouth before rising. We set our plates on a table against the wall. Shouldn't we wash them? She shook her head. We have people for that. When compared to her earlier banter, her words seemed clipped. I followed her onto the plateau, then across the grassy field to the mouth of the cave. Her pace dictated the import of what she'd learned about me. I jogged to keep up. Before we entered the shadowy mouth, an ear-splitting ringing echoed up and down the tunnel. Shabana wheeled around. Invasion! She sped onto, then across the plateau. The Michonne ran so fast I couldn't match half her pace. When she came to a halt, I sidled up next to her, then glanced down, across the valley toward the western pass. Low figures skittered into the valley, and I recognized them immediately. Orange skin, pointed ears. Demons. They found me.